Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Moving Back to America, another perfect launch for another perfect show. Here on the best produced show on the internet. Merry Christmas to everybody. It's December 24th as we record this, and it's great to be here. And I have a brief little bit of business before I get started. It's a minor thing seems like it, but it's a major thing to me and to someone else too. You may remember we talked on the show a couple episodes ago called American Cowards, and I talked about a letter. I talked about a blog post about a letter of a woman who wrote that she was too intimidated by all of this stuff to really stand up, but this was the list of things she was going to do, and I basically said I think we need more than that. I just wanted to say that I saw the letter as a result of a post on Victory Girl's blog, and as always with these things, whenever you see these kind of news stories that are about something else, I read the block quotes that were included in Victory Girls, and I heard back from this woman's husband who said that interpretation was a little bit simplistic and not really fair. And true enough, it was. I was in that very same episode. I talked about how I had given that speech in Texas for Ted Cruz and joked about shooting Californians on sight. And the original post had the video of me speaking hyperbolically. And then a second version of that, the one that got all the attention, had not included the video or any of the context or any of the rest of it, gave people kind of a false impression. So in any event, I feel like I did give a more, let's just say it was a pretty shallow read of what she actually wrote. So I'd like to just basically apologize for that. I took the contents of an entire fairly long letter, and I only used the two block quotes that were provided on the link that I went to from Instapundit, and no one was complaining or demanding an apology. On the contrary, they just said that I think maybe you may have been a little overly simplistic about that, and turns out I was. So apologies to Sarah if that was something I probably should have delved a little deeper into. But as I explained, there's just this maelstrom of information, and I'll try not to make that mistake again. Anyway, moving on. It is Christmas Eve, and today's title is called the Utopia Curse. And two things led me to doing this. I usually don't know what I'm going to do until I'm driving into work, although I often have some ideas floating around. And this is something I've been thinking about for quite a while, but this is going to be a combination of very different ideas. One of them is a study from the National Institute of Mental Health that occurred quite a long time ago. It's very important. And the other is Christmas Eve. And what do the study of mice and rats and unwrapping presents on Christmas morning and all of the magic of Christmas Eve that still exists for so many of us here in this country, despite all of the turmoil and the conflict, what do those two things have in common? Well, I come to realize that all of the turmoil and the conflict are a result of all of the presents under the tree. A bit of a statement, so let's see if I can back that up. I personally, I'm 61 years old, was born in 1959. And I know every single person in every single generation, as a general rule, feels that this is true. I remember a line in a book, this wasn't mine, but a line in a book about the armies of Israel surrounding Jericho and marching around the city and blowing their trumpets and having the walls come crashing down. And the quote was something about some flinty old Israelite sergeant saying, "Oh, these damn trumpets, they're no good. When we used to knock down walls with battering rams, and if we didn't have those, we use our fists and our heads." So everybody always wants to glorify their youth, or often do, and assume that was just as good as things got, because we filter memory. We remember the good things. We don't tend to remember the bad things. But with that said, I think in several different areas, I was phenomenally lucky. First of all, I was lucky to be born in America. Very lucky. Secondly, I was lucky to be born in an age where, an intellectual age, which truthfully now, without hyperbole, or hyperbole if you prefer, if you're from a public school. It was the time that I grew up in has been a golden age of science, because at no point in history did the answers that, taking astronomy, for example, these beautiful, incredible images of the planets, the close-up pictures of the planets, for all of human history prior to my life on this earth, the planets were little fuzzy little blobs that you've seen in a telescope, or just a dot on the naked eye. And then along came these Voyager probes and all of the rest of them. They continue. And the images continue to get more and more amazing. And so everybody born after this point will have nothing but those videos and those images to see. Everybody before the time I was born had nothing but blurry, out of focus black. I remember working in the planetarium, we would have a picture of Jupiter or Mars that we would use when we'd fly through the solar system. And it was usually the best photograph that was taken by an earthbound observatory, so before Hubble, obviously before the Voyager probes. And if you got a really sharp-looking Jupiter that showed some detail, I remember those images. I saw them thousands of times. Pathetic. So I was the only generation, and if you're this approximate age, in fact, if you're a young person now, you're still on the tail end of this, and you're lucky if you have curiosity. And I'm getting somewhere with this, but it's Christmas Eve, so what the heck, we're going to have fun. Prior to my lifespan, all of these things were unknown and unknowable. You died before you got the answer. People born after this time have been given the answer from the beginning. And I'm of an age cohort that had the once-in-a-lifetime experience, once-in-history experience, of wanting to know the answers to certain questions and then having them be delivered to you. I didn't have the questions without the answers, and I didn't have the answers without the questions. It's an amazing gift. Same thing's true for computers, by the way. Watching computers grow from the first computer game that I played, which was on my high school computer server. It was on a teletype. That's how old I am. So what does this have to do with anything, and especially with our turmoil and woke politics and all the rest of it? Well, of all the things that I'm grateful for, including being very grateful for being born in the space age and being a product of that optimism, and that optimism based on actual experience. We were going higher, faster, further every day. That's what I grew up with. I'm one of those space kids. I'm one of those Apollo kids, and lament our lost future. So what does all this have to do with anything that actually matters? Well, here's the connection, I think. This is Christmas Eve as we record this. Christmas Eve in America, at least for a significant period of time, two, 3 generations, I would say at least, there is nothing like an American Christmas. And I don't think that I need to really go into a whole lot more detail than that. Christmas is beautiful in many places around the world, very spiritual. Many places don't have Christmas. I pity those poor, poor bastards from the bottom of my heart. But American Christmas, this sort of idea of the religious undertones there, but at the same time there's this kind of jolly elf in a red suit who brings all these presents. There is, that's probably one of our members calling about some lack of service. Tell those peons to pound sand, and I will deal with them when I find time after I'm finished reclining on my bench eating my peeled grapes. American Christmas, and the feeling that you had as a little kid on Christmas Eve, it's the best thing ever happened in human history. People in my general age group, and virtually everybody watching this, I would imagine, knows the feeling of being a young child and writing your letters to Santa, and then you wake up the next day. Actually, you wake up that night, if you're anything like me. You're not allowed into the living room, not allowed out there, okay. And you wake up at midnight or 2 or 3 in the morning, and you'd kind of creep out of bed, and you'd look in the living room. It'd be outline of a bicycle or, Johnny Astro or Major Matt Mason or whatever the case may be, and you'd see it out there. You couldn't touch it until your parents woke up, and that meant crack of dawn. That was an eternity from the moment you saw the presents till the time your parents woke up, all the rest of it. But basically, Americans grew up with this idea that even poor Americans, because we were probably, if not lower middle class, we were certainly middle class. We all grew up as children with the idea that if you wanted something, you wished upon a star. If you were a good boy or good girl, you had a pretty good chance of getting it, because we weren't wishing for Mercedes for Christmas. We were wishing for a bike. And we got it. So what does that have to do with anything? Well, I have grown up in America that has known nothing but prosperity, and especially importantly, has known no real sense of fear. I've grown up in an America that was so well defended and so prosperous that all of those things that have accompanied all of humanity have largely been absent from me. I'd say this somewhat ashamed. I shouldn't be, I suppose. I just know how uncommon it is for me to say that I've never been really hungry. I've been hungry, I've been starving, but I've never been hungry. I've never been cold, and hypothermia once, and that was rough, but I've never had to deal with that every day. And I've never been in pain for anything longer than 6 or 7 hours maximum, real on-the-ground pain. That was a long time by modern standards, but it did me a lot of good. So what does this have to do with all of this woke culture and all of this corruption and all of this insanity and all the rest of it? Well, quite a while ago now, I would say at least 40, 50 years ago now, there was some groundbreaking experiments conducted by a scientist named John Calhoun. He was working at the National Institute of Mental Health, and he was looking into overpopulation, which I remember from my childhood as being the global warming of our times. And now we're actually just starting to dance around the point that we're going to close with here. This was the threat of the age, aside from nuclear war, which was a real threat. Overpopulation for a while there in the 70s, late 60s, early 70s, was the global warming of today. It was the thing that was going to kill us all. And it was going to destroy the planet, and we had no future. And if we didn't act very, very quickly, then it was all lost. And you might want to see my right angle this week called Intellectual Fascists about a statement that Thomas Sowell made. He was quoting somebody else when he said that intellectuals can't function at room temperature. There always has to be a crisis, because if there's not a crisis, then why would anybody, what power would intellectuals have over us to show us how smart and how virtuous they are? So this is a complex episode, so just hang with me on this. We'll tie all this together. So John Calhoun did an experiment, and his primary focus was on population density. But having watched the 50 years since then, I realized that, presumptuous to say, I'm not trying to deconstruct this groundbreaking scientist or his experiment, but what I think he discovered was something bigger than what he went looking for. Because he did an experiment, a legendary experiment, I'm going to talk about that for a minute, and returned some mind-boggling results. And he thought that these results had to do with population pressure, and certainly that's a big part of it. But in the years since that experiment, having watched what's happened to society that Calhoun couldn't see, I think he was onto something even deeper. Here's the experiment. Calhoun set out to create a mice utopia, a mouse utopia. And what he did was he constructed this, it was like these little drawers and runways and passageways and open area, but everybody had tiny little crooks and nannies hidden away, and you could build your nests. And he put mice into this utopia, and there's plenty of food. That's an important point, critical to remember throughout the entire course of the discussion of this experiment and what it has to do with our society are two fundamental aspects, and you cannot forget these, because these are what are the operands, basically. First of all, there was an endless supply of food for the mice. Secondly, there were no predators. Those two conditions had been met. No predators and an endless supply of food. He puts a number of mice down into this new habitat and watches what happens. Now, the first mice to enter Mice Utopia are pretty damn happy mice. They're looking around. They're exploring every corner of it. They're finding nesting sites. They're hooking up with each other. They're saying, "Whoa, this is awesome!" And they're just as happy as mice can be. Now, he followed them for about 25 generations. It was a multi-year experiment. And so, as these mice entered Mouse Utopia, They did everything that you and I feel like we would do upon entering a utopia. They said, my God, look how beautiful it is and all this food and how lucky we are. It's unbelievable. Let's start a house. Let's raise some kids. This is marvelous. And this is what America is. It's a form of utopia. I'm not saying it's equal for everybody. I'm not going to get into that argument now. I'm talking about for masses of human beings, tens and hundreds of millions of human beings. This country is a form of utopia. It was utopia as described by Calhoun as an experiment. In other words, a wide open place with nobody really there and nothing but resources and lots and lots and lots of places for you to kind of make your own way and build your own home. That's exactly what the first generation of mice did. And they had lots and lots and lots of babies, and they had lots and lots and lots of sex. So the mice population, I'm going to try and draw this backwards for you. Here's time. Here's the number of mice. As they enter mice utopia, the population just goes, whoa, just goes screaming up higher. So far, so good. It's exactly what you would expect. It's what you saw in mice utopia, and it's what you see in the history of the United States. But then something happened. After he got several generations into it, fourth or fifth generation or something like that, or even deeper perhaps, that population growth curve started to level off. And it leveled off while there was still physical space in the utopia. There's still all the food. He didn't cut the food, and he didn't introduce predators. But the mice started doing some things that really shocked and disturbed him. They did not continue to grow. They did not continue to have as strong a family structure as mice can possibly have. They didn't take care of their young anymore. They didn't do any of those things. And the children, the next generations, succeeding generations of mice, showed more and more and more of these pathologies, and it was not a long time in passing, although it was generations in mice lifetimes, where the level of violence began to really dramatically increase. And then you would start to see mice fighting with each other all the time and biting their tails and tails being bitten off and piling up on mice and killing them and so on. Mothers are no longer taking care of their babies. In fact, it's sometimes common among rodents. I had this experience when I was 11 or 12 with a hamster. It just really messed me up. Sometimes a rodent mother, if the conditions are stressful or whatever, they'll eat their own children. And that's what these mice started doing. They're just trying to recover the nutrients that they put into making these kids in the first place. But that's disturbing behavior. Cannibalism is high on my list of things that I don't think about right around Christmas time. And a number of other pathologies developed. And one of the reasons, probably the primary reason, was not because these mice were short on food, and it's not because these mice had to live in fear. These pathologies developed because they didn't have to live in fear and because they had all the resources that they wanted. Not in spite of them, but because of them. And strange little subsets of behavior started to spin out of this. And one of the most interesting to me, and just let me know at which point this might ring a little bell for you, and I'll be looking into the camera lens and watching thousands of little light bulbs go ding, start to understand why I'm going down this path here. One of the unusual behaviors that they started to see was a small number of mice did nothing but groom themselves. Some people referred to them, I don't know if Calhoun did himself, but the term used for them was the beautiful ones. And while all these other mice are out there fighting and tearing themselves to pieces, and they're just bloody messes, and they're really just traumatized, nonstop, constant combat, a number of mice secluded themselves, individuals, relatively small numbers, and all they did was groom themselves and fluff themselves up. And they were absolutely gorgeous. They were perfect specimens of mice sexiness. But they never, ever interacted. They never mated. They didn't do anything but just sit there and make themselves look pretty for their own benefit. They were little mice narcissists. And the only thing that mattered to them, for some reason or another, was looking good. And they didn't employ those good looks for the kind of things you might think you would employ good looks for if you're one of those original generation of mice. In other words, wow, that is one hot-looking mouse. I believe I'm going to march over to the food bowl there and offer her a free food pellet. That didn't happen. They weren't interested. They just interested in making themselves look beautiful. And that was all they did. The children of these later generations of mice showed an incredible lack of imagination and initiative and they were just plain stupid. They just could not solve problems. Whenever they were removed from the safety of the little territories that they'd been born into, they functioned very, very poorly as compared to the first 2 or 3 generations of mice. They just simply sat there and they couldn't make any sense out of their surroundings, and they just basically just sort of vegged out and got triggered and went back to their safe spaces. And then, so the population graph does this. It grows, levels off, and it stays level, and you're in this kind of world of turmoil. And then all of a sudden, there's this enormous die-off, just to zero. And when I saw that graph of these mice just dying, you want to say, okay, well, finally, the predators caught up with them, or the food, or they got too stupid. But the point is, he never cut off the food, and he never introduced predators. They just died out. They just stopped reproducing, and the population fell to zero. Because for generations, the mice that had been born into Mice Utopia had experienced nothing but plenty, nothing but security, physical security, but most importantly, they came into a world where they had no opportunities for expansion, exploration, or anything new. Their place in the world was determined the instant they came into this world. They were born into little mice families that had their own territory staked out for generations, and whether it was big territory, small territory, and social cohorts, there were 3,000 mice on this thing. And they were born into this situation, and they didn't leave it. They had no interest in leaving it, didn't know how to leave it, and they simply lost the will to live. And over 25 generations of endless prosperity, they just died off. They were given Utopia, and the first mice to enter Utopia did everything that you would think you would do if you entered Utopia. The middle stage was a form of stability in terms of population numbers. They didn't just keep reproducing through the ceiling. They hit a level, and then they simply stopped reproducing on their own. He didn't do anything. He just watched them. And that period went on for quite a long time. And then suddenly, after about 23, 24, 25 generations, they simply just died out. They just stopped. They lost the will to live. So what does it have to do with America and Christmas? Well, I think that that the society that we built for ourselves is as close to a human utopia as we're likely to get. And I'm not going to go into all of the yeah buts, except to say yeah but. Yeah, but yes, there's poverty. Yes, there's crime. Yes, there's all of these things, all of it. I understand all of that. I'm not saying that America is a perfect place. I'm not even saying really America's utopia in the ideal sense of the word, but compared to other human societies throughout all of history and all around the world, it is the closest to utopia you're going to find. So why is it that this country, at the height of its powers, and in a world where 10-year-old Billy has never had to worry about being hungry or cold or being invaded or murdered or watching my family get raped and murdered and having their throats of our children slit before my face like every other generation's history. What does this have to do with this? Well, this behavior that Calhoun was looking at was mammal behavior. There's a lot of difference between mice and men, big differences between mice and men. There are big similarities too. And this is clearly something that's built into our genetics. And what Calhoun concluded was that high population density caused these pathologies. And he's certainly right about that. If the mouse utopia had extended to the horizon, then the mice simply would have kept pushing out, and they constantly would have been challenged, and they'd have new places to go, and their children would have other places to explore and grow into and make their own lives for. But the only thing he didn't give them was unlimited space. He gave them unlimited resources, he gave them unlimited security, but he didn't give them unlimited space. And so he concluded that population density led to these rises in violence, these rises in narcissistic behavior, and all the rest of these things. I only have the benefit of 40 or 50 years of observing society that he didn't have, and I think that the population density and pressure stuff is a huge part of this, which is why our cities are so much more dysfunctional than the countryside, the rural areas, or even the suburbs. But I think there's something bigger than that he just didn't live long enough to see in humans. And that is this. We are here, all of us are here, humans are here, and mice are here, because we have developed strategies that have been successful for our survival. Mice that weren't afraid of cats didn't pass those genes on to other mice because they became dinner for those cats. And so mice are naturally afraid of movement. They don't like the light. They're nocturnal animals, generally speaking. There were probably daytime mice. Some mouse just decided, what the hell, I'm just going to go out and gather my stuff in the daytime. Over pretty quick for that mouse. And so these behaviors that protected mice are built into mice today. And for good reason. That's why they're there. That's why there are mice today, is because of these behaviors that were manifested in Calhoun's experiment. Same thing's true for people. And the thing that I'm looking at here, the thing I'm trying to focus on here, is a quality of humanity that has had a tremendous survival benefit for us. It's a highly selected trait. And that is the ability for us to worry about the future. That anxiety is built into humanity. It's built into the flesh of humanity. The part that religion understands is flawed. Christianity teaches that there are ideals of behavior and that only one person was free from the prison of the flesh. And when we talk about the prison of the flesh, when we think about lust and gluttony and all the other 7 deadly sins, what we're really basically saying is there is a biological set of behaviors that is built into us that has gotten us here, that are pro-survival in a certain environment. But as we become more advanced intellectually and spiritually, we realize that these are not generally good behaviors, certainly not good behaviors in a world where there's an abundance of resources. We look down on crime and murder, rightfully so, and we see these as morally abhorrent things. If you're starving and you're out in the middle of the plains someplace, murder is what's necessary in order for you to survive another day. And so I think what we're seeing in America now is the curse of utopia. What I see is a society built out of flesh, and that meat morality, that part of us that is programmed into our physical beings, is not something that we can just simply turn off. It's benefited us enough to get us here, but it's quite a problem. And this is the story that I saw that made me want to connect these two things. There's a university that's offering a women's business program. So, okay, and it's a classic example of wokeness. And you think, was this Oregon State University? No, this is the University of Georgia State University, rather. Sorry, Bulldogs. Not that I owe you anything from University of Florida fan. But this is an article from today from Campus Reform. Those wonderful, brave kids who are on campus and reporting on the social peer pressures that they have to swim upstream against every day. And this is an article from today. Georgia State University's business school listed 10 pronoun options on a sign up for a women's business program. Among the options, these are things that you can call yourself, and that much more importantly than things that you call themselves, these are not only things that you call yourself, these are things that you not only expect but demand other people call you. Otherwise, you'll be triggered emotionally. So if you don't like being called him or her or he or she, you can be called a, she, here, this, and you'll be happy to know yourself. So here's a quote from the Georgia State University, from the article, Campus Reform article. University's J. Mack School of Business hosts a program called Women Lead, which, quote, equips female students to excel in school, enter the workforce with developed skills, and find their place in leadership positions. So far, so good. However, because apparently, to the progressive mind, women are extremely fragile creatures who can't handle criticism or challenges, they have decided that you can, when you register, you get to pick your pronoun. In other words, who are we to tell you that what your gender is? Here's a class that is not a business class. It's not a business lesson. It's a lesson for women in business. And the first thing they do is say that there's no such thing as gender. You can be any gender you want to. And if they can't see the contradiction in that, then they're beyond my help, and I suspect that's the case. But what the first thing that they do is they talk about preparing women for leadership positions, which I'm entirely in favor of, is they say, well, now, what would you like all of us, and when I say all of us, I don't mean the professor and the students, I mean the entire society. What would you like all of society to call you? Would you like us to refer to you as she or je or yourself or whatever? And so you see this kind of insanity, which gets stronger and stronger every day in this country. Every day we see more and more and more of this insanity. And you sit there, as I do, and say, what's going on? The world's gone barking mad. It's gone absolutely insane. Yes, exactly, it has. And the reason it's gone insane is because there are people who fight to the death, whose entire survival response is triggered. That's a great word that they've come up with, because that's what it is triggered by the fact that somebody would presume to call you a she because you appear to be a woman in a woman's business class. And they will fight you to the death. They will continue to go to war about this and treat it, and they'll talk about it too. This is a physical assault on me. Calling me she when I haven't given you permission to call me she, that's violence against me. That's a physical assault. They really believe this. And they are going to fight to the death until finally there's nothing but caves full of matted purple hair and skeletons with nose rings that have fallen through the nose cavity from where the cartilage used to be. And that's what they fight to the death about. Why? Why would you fight to the death about something like that? Why would people consider something as innocuous as somebody calling you a he or a she be something worth going to fight and die for from an emotional level? Doesn't make any sense. But it does if you think about the world of Mice Utopia, if you think about the Utopia Curse. Because if you are one of these students, just as an example, I'm talking about woke politics now. I'm not talking about fighting actual injustice. Actual injustice still exists, not much of it. That's why you have to have so many hate crimes. Like there's a noose in my garage because I'm the only black NASCAR driver. Actually, it's a little loop that you use to pull down the door. There's loops on pretty much most of these garages. And Jesse Smollett inventing people. Always, you see it every day. I was attacked by Trump supporters, beaten up, and they called me racial epithets, and they threatened my life. Didn't happen. So why did they claim that it happened? Well, they had to claim that it happened because their genetics, their survival instinct is fully activated. And when you see these Antifa bastards marching down the street smashing windows, and you ask them why are they behaving like such fascists, wearing black and kicking people, they'll tell you with a great deal of enthusiasm, we're not fascists, we're fighting fascism. It's the Republicans that are Nazis. We're fighting for the life of this. This is an assault on our lives, voting for Donald Trump. How many times have you heard that in the last 4 years? This is an assault on our lives. How many times have you heard hysterical liberals basically, this is the end of democracy? Why? Why? Because we are built for worry, we're built for anxiety, and we're built for combat. If these things were not in our bloodstream as a species, we wouldn't be here. There undoubtedly were individuals, and conceivably even small populations of people who were very welcoming of strangers and had no worries about the next day, who slept peacefully in the cave, didn't put any guards out there worried about leopards or any of the rest of that paranoid right-wing fear-mongering. And those peaceful, gentle societies lasted for a generation or two or three, and then they disappeared because nobody put a guard at the edge of the cave to watch against leopards coming in the night. The only people that survived were the ones that were aware enough to understand that you got to be worried all the time and you've got to be prepared to fight all the time. Those are the people that survive in the environment that produced us. But now that we live in utopia, and I'm talking about utopia relative to the life of a caveman. Let's just go right there. Nice, easy cliche. Compared to the life of a caveman, in Europe 50,000, 40,000 years ago. This isn't only utopia, this is heaven. This is unimaginable heaven. Those people had to fight for their lives pretty much on a daily basis. They had to kill animals with their bare hands and watch them die. They had to skin them, often alive. They had to carry the meat back. They had to deal with rotten meat. They had to worry about what they're going to do to get through winter because they don't know how long winter is going to last. Winter is going to last as long as it takes for the sun god to decide to return. And we better sacrifice some of this food that we have, this precious stuff that we've collected. We're going to have to get rid of it to show the sun god, or whatever happens to be the case, that we're worthy of him coming back again so we don't get killed next year by an endless winter, and on and on and on and on and on. That's what this is utopia compared to. Not compared to real utopia, perfect ideal society, but compared to any other example on Earth. So let's just go right back to the caveman. It's nice neutral thing, and it doesn't trigger anybody because there aren't too many cavemen wandering around anymore, at least not in universities, and you can thank God for that. Thank God for the, be grateful and sympathetic for the cavemen, not for the university. So we treat whatever threats we have in our environment at the level that we are designed to treat them as. And if we are not driven to fits of adrenaline-filled rage by the sight of our children being torn to pieces by a giant saber-toothed tiger, and if the ability to respond with blind rage to that kind of a threat is not only built into us, but selected heavily for, in other words, without this, you're not going to make it, then what we find is that people will respond to them getting soy milk instead of almond milk with the same level of emotional rage and physiological stimulation, adrenaline, heartbeat, all of that, that they would normally spend on things like, oh, there's a tiger eating my children. Ah, stab, 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 stab. Ah, gouge, 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 gouge. Here's your latte, Mr. Zuckerberg. Soy milk. I asked for goddamn almond milk. You will never work in this. Get out of my life. We rise to the level. We will make a crisis out of whatever crisis is available. And while these people are being triggered by, somebody called me she. As I happen to be a woman, I could have been any one of 700 genders. How dare you? How dare you assume that I want to be called she just because I look like a woman? How dare you? That is violence against me. Okay, that's what people do when the greatest threat in their lives is non-existent. When all the threats are actually non-existent, real threats, enemies coming down from the hill on horseback with swords, famine, plague, don't forget plague, all of them. When they're gone, we will elevate whatever stimulus is in our life up to the level of full-on fight or flight, physical reaction, because that's what we're built to do. And so the prosperity curse, the Utopia curse, is why all civilizations fall when they're at the heights of their powers. It's because of what the mice did. Some of them just do nothing but preen themselves. And I would refer you to Instagram if you want to see examples of these kind of behaviors. Some of them simply look for something to fight. All these mice did for the large part of the duration of this was simply fight and attack each other. Not for food, there's plenty of food. Not even really for space, but just because there was nothing else to do. And they're born into this world where they have no way to go and nowhere to excel, so they got nothing to do but fight each other, chew each other to bits, kill each other, murder each other, eat each other. No interest in family, no interest in recreation, no interest in procreation. I shouldn't have said recreation, it's nothing but recreation. And so there you go. And here we are. What John Calhoun found in mice, he also found in rats. And if you study rats, you'll find the same behavior in chimps. And if you find it in chimps, you'll find it in people. And it is the paradox and the curse of our design that the better things get for us, the more determined we are to destroy what made it possible. the more effective our military is at keeping actual invaders away from us, the more likely we are to turn on the military, to attack them, to denigrate them, to call them baby killers and murderers, and we don't need them. And this is like the joke about the elephant gun. You know, I carry an elephant gun with me wherever I go. Well, what the hell do you need an elephant gun for? There aren't any elephants here. Uh-huh. It's because I got my elephant gun. So that's it, folks. It's a Christmas thought, and you know, it can be a happy one, because all of these social pathologies that are occurring in this country right now and are going to continue to accelerate are caused by too much security and too much prosperity. And history bears this out. Every single civilization bears this out in history. That's bad, bad, bad news. Bad news. The good news is that we're not mice and we're not chimps, and that those of us who are able to understand these things and read history and appreciate the sacrifices made to get us here are free from this particular curse. Those of us who love this country love it because of the sacrifices that people made in order to give it to us. And we don't take it for granted. And we don't assume it's free. And we don't simply go along. And we don't tear each other to pieces. And we don't spend our entire lives in front of a mirror pimping ourselves up to look good for ourselves. We get it. We can learn. You can learn from history, and millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of Americans do understand history. That's why they're in this fight the way that we are right here at BillWhittle.com. But many of them don't. And it's important that they never find out what's going on, which is why you have to control media information, schools, and all the rest of it. Best thing I ever heard about this was a very, very simple little 4-line piece of doggerel, I guess. By the way, this little ditty I'm about to give you is a circular statement, and that's why it's powerful. And of the many images available to us as humans, one of the oldest that goes the furthest back is the image of the snake eating its tail. That goes back a long, 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 long way. Because of the design of a snake, even primitive people could see that if a snake started eating its tail and just continued to consume itself around and around and around and keep growing new tail, that's immortality. That's an eternal cycle. So with that said, here's the modern take on the snake eating its tail. Ready? Here's your human history lesson. It's all you need to know about human history if you really want to know. Strong men make good times. Good times make weak men. Weak men make bad times. Bad times make strong men. Strong men make good times. Good times make weak men. Weak men make bad times. Bad times make strong men. Strong men make good times. Good times make weak men. Weak men make bad times. Bad times make strong men. And around and around and around and around it goes. And if we are capable of being grateful for the things that we have here in our utopia on Earth, we escape from this and we learn to discipline ourselves. And I've noticed that of the many people who work in special forces, it's been a great, great honor of my life to personally get to know several members of SEAL teams and Green Berets and all the rest of them. I notice that those people are not terribly offended if you assume that you call them he. If I walk up to you and say, "Excuse me, sir," they don't go, "How dare you assume that I'm called sir? I want to be known as Jin. You have no right to." They don't do that. And the reason that Special Forces guys don't do it, and the reason they don't brag about things the way I do either, the reason that they don't tell these true tales of adventure like I do, is because they don't have to, because they live them for real. And when you walk into a room with people who are shooting real machine guns at you, and you have an actual genuine threat that is of the level that your human body is designed to deal with, these guys are not triggered by anything. They're not even triggered by being shot at. That's how bloody advanced they are. And those people are the people that I like to remember at Christmas, when there's a Christmas tree and family gatherings and all of the presents and the bike outside and all of the prosperity and all of the freedom and all of the security and all of this wonderful, wonderful, wonderful stuff. This is the trap. How do we get out of this without being aware of it? No one wants to destroy society to make it better. No one wants to start war games, an actual war, in order to provide people with something to compare themselves to that is genuine threat, as opposed to not getting your Starbucks order right. Nobody wants to do that. And so this is the paradox. This is the trap. This is it. This is the curse of utopia. This is it. We want these things. We should have these things. Everybody wants this for their children. Nobody wants to see their children fighting and burning in the streets and shooting and dying, understanding that if that happened, those of them survived would be happier than they are now. And that is a sick, sad truth of the world. This generation and my generation, all of us that have been given everything, are neurotic, unhappy, miserable people, elevating tiny things to the level of life-threatening crises, when the people who actually went through genuine horror, the Americans that went to fight in war and saw horrible things, and my Russian wife, and her country's been invaded since it's been a country, and the grandmothers watching their children being murdered and their everything they own being burned to the ground, and all of this horrific hardship. It's unimaginable to us. The thing you find from these people is that when they talk about those days, when you talk about people, there are not many of them left anymore, who lived like as my father did, grew up in the Great Depression and then went to World War II, what you find is the more difficult the times were, the more people look back on it with happiness and remember it as a time of unparalleled this is an important word, fulfillment, unparalleled purpose, a fundamental sense of community and connectedness and courage and all of these great virtues that we're missing today. Anyway, Merry Christmas out there. I'm not advocating taking down your Christmas tree and burning your Christmas presents and replacing them with plague-filled rats. I'm not saying that at all. I am saying that if you have an opportunity to live in this kind of utopia, and you have the ability to talk to your children, remind them as often as you can, as I was reminded of and as I remind myself on a daily basis, what it took to be here, the sacrifices that were made to be here, what kind of sacrifices have to continue to be made to be here. And let's not insult all of the people that fought and died not only for this country and gave up their lives to make us this prosperous and safe, but not just the soldiers of this country. Let's just out of respect for all of us, we are all descended from the same cell, really. So we got a lot in common. We're all Africans, really, when you get right down to it. Why don't we show a little bit of gratitude for the people that had to fight real leopards and real wars and real crises, and not remember them, and use the intellect that we have as human beings to overcome the defaults of the flesh and the spiritual qualities of forgiveness and hope and redemption and peace, that are the antidote for us living like a bunch of mice in a laboratory someplace, being studied by some cold intelligence that simply is interested in watching us tear ourselves apart. Merry Christmas, everybody. It's been a pleasure seeing you today. I will be here tomorrow morning for a Christmas broadcast, don't you worry. Until then, thank you so much for your membership. And for those of you who enjoy messages like this, the membership continues to grow. And if you're not one of those people, I would really urge you to do it. Not as a Christmas present to me, but as a Christmas present to yourself and to your country. These ideas have to be protected, and that requires resources. So if you want to, go to the link right below and go to billwhittle.com, become a member. Much better option for us, but if you want to make a one-time donation, we certainly can use that too. Merry Christmas. I will see you tomorrow morning on Christmas Day, and tomorrow we're not going to talk about anything nasty. Tomorrow's just going to be a wonderful, beautiful day. All right? Don't let these bastards take your Christmas away from you, and don't let them elevate these trivial things to the level of fight or flight reaction and ruin this most beautiful, most amazing of holidays in the history of the world. American Christmas is as good as it gets, folks. I really do believe that. Merry Christmas to all of you out there, and we will see you tomorrow right here on Moving Back to America.